Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this podcast, what I want to talk about is internet feelings. Now, when I say internet feelings, I'm not talking about, how you feel about somebody that you saw on Instagram. I was doing some reading, scrolling through social media, and I'll talk about that in a second. Scrolling through social media, and I saw this link about this story about how, the internet or our actions with our cell phones have made a lot of people feel lonely and isolated. And so when I read it, I was like, that's interesting. And so I clicked on it and started reading. And obviously, it got me to thinking, because like over the last 2 decades, if you will, the internet has done so much. I mean, it's given us the ability to, talk to people across the globe. I just know, like, when I first started on the internet, it was about getting in chat groups and, learning and meeting new people, if you will. I could email anybody across the globe, at any time. And then with the advent of cell phones, obviously that allowed us to be able to speak to people when we're away from home. Had to put that pager down and move over to the cell phones. And then the advent of social networks and social networking and social media. And what that did was that allowed us to connect with people, friends, family, foes, people from the past, childhood friends, college friends, coworkers, whomever. And you could do that really at the click of a button. And, subsequently smartphones made it easier to stay connected with people around the clock at any given time. And you would think with all of that stuff happening, that life, if you will, for some would be a lot more simpler. But it really wasn't. And the article talked about how studies have shown that it's left a lot of people, feeling lonely and isolated. And they gave a couple of examples. And I said, you know what, I might as well bring this to the podcast, because this is something really cool and interesting to talk about. One thing that they had outlined, as far as relationships, social media has shown that relationships, or at least are portrayed to be a lot more superficial than what they really are. And this is true. You really can't form a relationship with someone unless you talk about real issues and share your problems. But listen, we all know that's not what happens on social media. For some people, social media is a place to make life look a lot better than what it really is. And to be honest, there's more than a few people who front, so rather than share what's really going on, people are more likely to talk and try to show things, as far as like their accomplishments, what they got, stuff that's dope. Or a nice dinner with their food pictures. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with any of that. But I think, for some, it's become very superficial, and, again, they're fronting. And so you have to you really got to kind of see through the BS. I mean, to be honest. And then also, how much of that are you willing to participate in? Like, case in point, like for me, just last week I was on vacation, and I found myself on vacation, and this was probably the first time in a while that I spent a lot less time, doing phone stuff and staying connected with my friends and stuff like that. And it was cool. And it was actually, kind of relaxing to get away from it, just walk around with the phone in my pocket, or, a couple of times the phone was just left wherever. And, but the thing about it was, being on vacation, I did take pictures, but I found myself not really sharing, a lot of the pictures that I took. A lot of the pictures just stayed in my cell phone. And, it was by design, because one, if I shared some of the pictures, then, I got a comment and, that could be time consuming in and of itself. But I'm not trying to, paint a picture as like, I didn't want people to see what kind of, because I had a dope vacation. I really enjoyed it. And, but I don't ever want to become one of those people who just post stuff just to post it. I don't want it to be like that. I think you should share when you want to share. And again, this isn't speaking to everybody, but, some people are, very good at hiding what is really, really real. And ultimately, they need to keep that facade up, And so, that relationship that they brag about, really ain't shit. And the dude who, they fawned over on social media, might not be the guy who she thought he was, and vice versa. So, real life is real life. And I think sometimes people kind of get those lines blurred. But that was one of the things that they pointed out, that, with social media, our relationships have grown, or at least are, at the very least, sometimes portrayed, and they seem to be more superficial. And, if you don't have meaningful connections with people, it's very possible that people could feel lonely and isolated. So, and that can happen even when you're surrounded by people. So that's something to kind of look out for. Another thing they talked about was the screen time, and what the screen time does. And when you have a good amount of screen time, one of the things that they pointed out was that you really lose the ability to read social cues. Excuse me. I've always been big on nonverbal communication, right? I think you can tell a lot by a person. I mean, if you walk in a room and a person's standing there with their arms folded, something's not right. I mean, that's perfect nonverbal communication. And I know for a fact, just because I'm a father with kids who have cell phones, their cell phones and their interactions on social media, it definitely interferes with their ability to read social cues from me. If I walk in the house and the trash hasn't been taken out, and I got this mean look on my face, and my kids are looking at me like, yo, and they're not even looking at me, they're looking at their phones. Oh, what's up, Dad? And they keep it moving. Then, obviously I'm going to be even more upset by the fact that the trash wasn't taken out, and you're sitting here on your cell phone and you're not even paying me any attention. So, sometimes you can do that and really not even be cognizant of it. And one of the things that it talked about in the article was that kids got better at reading people's emotions just 5 days after being away from their cell phones. So it's not necessarily a bad thing for them to, kind of detach themselves from time to time. And we know for a fact, as far as adults, it definitely takes a toll on our intelligence as well, and our ability to catch up on social cues as well. When you're sitting face to face with somebody, you can't hit them with, smiley face emojis. You can tell a lot from people by looking at them, studying them, their nonverbal communication, their body language, if you will, the gestures that they have. But to be honest, you're not going to get that if you're looking at a cell phone. If you're looking at social media, all of that stuff is going to be missed. And, at this point, you really can't afford to miss it. And in a lot of ways, again, it goes back to what they said, I could see how someone would feel lonely and isolated because, screen time definitely interferes with, the ability for people to read social cues and to see how you're actually feeling. You could be down and out and somebody might not even know it because they didn't really pay you or give you the attention that you needed, when you walked in a room or when you said something or what have you. So, it's something to definitely keep in mind, not just for us, but for our children as well. Another thing they pointed out was the emphasis on quantity of relationships and not quality of relationships. And one of the things that I wrote down that was highlighted very eloquently in the piece was that it says that the average Facebook user has 338 friends. And obviously, clearly, having a bunch of friends doesn't make you feel less lonely on social media. And you might think, okay, well, 338 friends, that's a lot. But sometimes the more connections that you have, the more stressed out you might be. And I think there's something to that. And it's partly because maybe you have better relationships on social media than you do, with your family members or friends. And so maybe maybe you communicate with your friend on Twitter more than you do, your aunt. Very possible, very plausible. And so it can be frustrating at times. But one thing I will say is it should never be about the quantity of, the connections or the relationships that you have on social media. Like for me, I'll use myself as an example. I have a pretty solid number of Twitter followers. But the number of followers compared to the number of people I actually contact on Twitter, it's a huge discrepancy, right? So it might be, let's say, I don't know. I'd probably say, let's say there's 100 people that follow me on Twitter, that I follow on Twitter, that I keep it, that I chat with on a monthly basis at some point in time or another. That pales in comparison to the, 2,000 something people that follow me. So you can get lost in that. I don't care about the 2,000. I don't care. I mean, to be honest, I really wish sometimes 100 people followed me. That would be perfect. But that's on a small scale. I mean, I can't imagine, just trying to really just kick it on Twitter like how I like to kick it, and you got 500,000 followers. I mean, because that means everything that you say and do, there's going to be a response to it. I don't want that. There's nothing better than being, anonymous and being able to move about. Those blue check marks come at a price. I don't need that. So, and it's cool. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I mean, I guess if I'm pretty sure there's some people, there might even be some of you listening who would want 500,000 followers. Personally, I don't. I really don't. Again, I would be cool just with 100 and I would be good. And I remember one time when I had 100 followers, I wondered what it would like to be, to have 1,000 followers on Twitter. And honestly, you can have 1,000 followers, but really 1,000 people really aren't following you. They're not even communicating with you. So it's not about the quantity. It's about the quality. That's what you should make it about. I would rather have 10 friends on Facebook who I really, really kick with and care about me that I can keep up with, and they can keep up with me, than have 2,000 people. Because it's just not, honestly, you're not going to be able to balance all of that. And it really depends on how much you value that type of stuff. Personally, I don't. I'm thankful for those who do rock with me on social media, and even more thankful for those who listen to this podcast. But, I've often said it doesn't really matter how many people listen to this podcast. And I'm being honest, it really doesn't. Do I want people to listen? Of course I do. But it really doesn't matter how many people, because I really don't know who listens. I don't. I mean, I get a number. I could go to like SoundCloud and look and see how many number of people listen. But, to be honest, I might do that once every 2 or 3 weeks. But I'm not about the numbers. I don't care about that. I just want people to listen and vibe with it. And that's it. But anyway, like I said, it's, I think that's something that people tend to lose sight of. It should be about the quality of the relationships that you have and the connections that you have on social media, not the quantity, because things get lost. And again, even having a big number, you can feel lonely and isolated and really be into your internet feelings. And I think the other thing I wrote down here that they talked about was smartphone addiction. I think we all probably have had that in some way, shape, or form. I think we all have, probably at some point. I know I have. Case in point, like, how many times have you gone to a restaurant and you see two people sitting across from each other and both of them have their cell phones out and like they're not paying each other any attention? I've seen I've seen that a lot. I'll say this. It really should be about you and that other person face to face. Now, if you pull out your phone and look something up, that's fine. But and I used to be really, really bad at that, but I've gotten to the point where now it's just like, I don't even care. My phone stays in my pocket if I take it out. And so, because it should be about that face-to-face interaction. I remember I was hanging out with one of my coworkers one time, and we went to lunch, and I spent like the whole lunchtime on my phone, and they were like, "Man, that's kind of rude." And I was like, "I don't care. I'm not talking to you." And looking back on it, it probably was rude, but anyway, I ain't like them like that anyway. But that's another story for another day. So yeah, I've seen that happen before. And I've even seen people, you're talking to them, and in mid sentence they stop and they shoot a text to somebody. The one thing that the article did say is that studies have shown on average, people check their phones 35 to 74 times a day. Now, how many times you check your phone a day? Probably a little bit more than that. Some more than others. I would venture to say that younger people probably check their phones a lot more than that. And one of the funny things is that it's so ironic that many people are scrolling through social media to see what other people are doing, rather than paying attention to the person that's in front of them. I mean, you can't have quality face-to-face interactions if you're distracted by your phone. That's just simple and plain. So, all of that stuff can definitely lead to, feelings of, loneliness and isolation. All in all, I think it's going to take an effort, really a maximum effort on your part to combat that. One of the things that I think and I suggest is have time to detach. Like, I remember I was talking to one of my boys and he's like, yeah, I don't do any social media stuff on Sundays. And I was like, why? He was like, it's the Sunday silence. And I was like, okay, what the hell is the Sunday silence? He's like, well, I don't do anything. He was like, I put my phone down. He's like, if I get a text or something, he said, I might respond to the text depending on who it is. And he said, other than that, I don't do anything. And he said, he said, you'll be surprised. He said, you should try it. You'll be surprised at how much you get accomplished when you're not stopping to look at the phone or check this or check that. It's okay. I was like, all right, bet I'm gonna try it. And lo and behold, it worked. And so what I would suggest is, find a day or two and just say, hey, I'm not going to do anything. I may respond to a text message depending on the severity of the text, but, just go silent and find other things to do. And I think you'll find that, you'll be able to be more productive, obviously. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure a lot of you use phone time and social media time and everything like that to get through the day of work. I do it myself. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't, because I do. That being said, you don't want to put yourself in a position where it's so comforting to you where you feel like you can't move without it, if you will, right? Or if you did, you'd feel lonely and isolated. Internet feelings are real, and people really do feel like this, and they really do put themselves in that type of situation. I think ultimately, if you can set a goal for yourself and slowly detach yourself from it and really, really focus in on what's in front of you, and that's usually another person, you're much, much better off. That's going to do it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for checking out the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm your boy 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.